I'm Michael Connelly. I write the books that the series Bosch is based on. I'm also been working on a spin-off of the series. Well, I've been writing about Bosch for, I think, 27 years, and it's been a long journey, but I want to prove that you can teach an old dog new tricks, and I think it's time for a new breed of cop. So we're really looking forward to unleashing this character. We're finally going to have a detective out there whose bite is worse than his bark. Without further ado, here's a first look at the new series, Detective Coltrane.
All right, how you gonna play this? Good boy, bad cop? I like the way you think, you son of a bitch.
God damn it, Coltrane. I told you, you bite another suspect without provocation, it's gonna be your job. I need you to give me your badge. Turn in your badge. Drop it. Drop it. Drop it.
Detective, this case has got us both chasing our tails.
Drop it. Drop it.
Hey, Coltrane, good job getting that informant to roll over.
Coltrane, that ball is evidence. It's not a toy. Now use that famous nose of yours and sniff out the killer. Damn it, Coltrane. You know I don't have a dog in this fight.
Coltrane, did you eat all the beef jerky again? Don't give me those eyes.
This standoff is not gonna work. Drop the badge. Drop it. Drop it.
Okay, fade away.
For God's sake, Coltrane, drop it.
Good evening, everyone. As we fade back from what turned out to be an April Fool joke that played on April 1st, but it's so funny, we could not resist opening the virtual launch of Michael Connelly with that lovely little video. Michael, it's lovely to see you again.
Glad to be here.
So Michael Connelly, as you all know, is an internationally #1 best-selling author. He's the executive producer of Bosch. He's also the creator and host of Murder Book, a podcast, and has made a number of other significant contributions to crime fiction. And recently, he's been a terrific source of charitable giving due to various promotions he's done to help out the publishing industry and others in this really difficult time. Mike, you've been an absolute star.
Oh, I don't know about that, but I'm kind of in a lucky position where I can do what I can do. So glad to help out.
Well, for those of you who don't know, I'm Barbara Peters. This is the Poison Pen, and I'm going to point over here to Fair Warning, which just arrived fresh from Michael's hand for you all. So please do send in an order for your copy before we run out, which we might easily do. So Mike, oh, there it is. Right, you've got your own copies. Right. Thank you for all the trouble you went to sign those. In this virtual age, we've all had to rethink how we do things, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fitting. I think my first book signing ever was at where you are. Well, actually, it was your older store. So I guess my first virtual bookstore event should be here as well.
Good point. Landmarks together. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you a few questions to follow up on Bosch, and then Patrick is going to step in and talk to you about the book. So I wanted to know, Mike, did you write season 6 wondering if it would be the last episode? Because there are various storylines that trail through it for Maddie, for Irvin, for Bosch himself, that wrap up in a way that you maybe could leave it there.
Good question. We did not know till we were filming. So most of the writing had been done, and we had an ongoing conversation with the studio. I was writing the last episode of season 6 and wanted to know whether to really wrap it up or wrap it up as a season or wrap it up as a series. And they had always promised they'd let us know when we were writing the end of the show. And
didn't get heated, but I kept saying, like, when are we going to know? And then they finally told us we're going to get season 7. So relax, don't kill Harry Bosch or Coltrane or anything like that. And but stuff was already in flow, storytelling wise. Scripts had been written, we had filmed stuff, and the storylines were already going. So we proceeded, but we knew that we were going to get another season.
Well, I'm delighted that you are. I thought season 6 was amazing. When you do season 7, will it be harder, easier, knowing it's the last one? It'll be sad in some respects, surely.
Yeah, I keep using the word bittersweet. It's what makes it bittersweet is that we shoot in LA, and a lot of people in the industry are used to leaving their families and going to like Albuquerque or Georgia to make a show for 5 months. And so people jump at the chance to work in LA. So we have a crew that's barely changed over 6 years. So we're a very tight-knit group, even though it's like 150 central people. Sometimes we get over 200 people working on the show, but essentially our crew has been the same, and we've gotten pretty close. So that's the sad part of it, that that's going to come to an end. And on a creative level, on a storytelling level, I know, or I feel at least, that we've sustained a very high quality. I think each season has gotten better than the one before it. And that's tough to do, and it's wearing. And so in a way, I kind of have had a little bit of a relaxing moment when I realized, okay, we're writing towards an end, and let's wrap this up and make the 7th the best season. Let's end it on a note that is fulfilling to readers. And then, it's going to sit on this platform and be streamed forever, probably. And it will be a complete show. It won't be like cut off and kind of like in the middle, or cut off with unanswered questions and so forth. So I really am happy to have that opportunity. I'm right in the middle of writing that last episode with the longtime showrunner, Eric Overmeyer. We wrote the first episode. We're going to write the last episode, and I think we're going to wrap it up in a way that the fans will enjoy. What's weird? Sorry if I'm going on too long, but the weird part is I'm not done with Harry Bosch in terms of writing books. So it's a little weird to end a show, but to keep writing books. So I think we've kind of cracked that, and I think it'll work for people who are fans of the books and the show.
I've gotten very attached to some of the characters. I know that both the guy that plays Jerry and the guy that plays Irv Irving, the chief, were on The Wire, and now they're in this show. I'm really addicted to the actor that plays the chief. And, I looked him up, but I thought he might have been a dancer. He has the most amazing way of moving. He's like a big panther or something. And I was interested to see that his background was really in music. He's a musician more than a dancer, but what an amazing, he's just terrific. He fills up the whole screen when he's on.
Yeah, he's quite a presence. He's actually at his home. He's played piano a few times in the scenes, and that's him playing usually his own composition. So he is a gifted musician. And, just at some point in his life tried acting, and he's gifted as an actor as well. And, he has a really commanding presence.
It's lovely to see Maddie and watch the arc of her growing up. But the woman I find, I love Amy Aquino. I think she's terrific as Phyllis. But the woman I found really interesting is Honey, because she and Bosch were at odds. She was his absolute nemesis. And then she saves him. And then there they are again, and she's become part of his life. And does that going to shape the books at all, or are the TV and the books really different?
No, they're different because, she's in one book and she gets killed in it. So, and
exactly.
What happened was we probably thought we were going to do that, but then we got, this great actress to play the part. And it's kind of like, we're not stupid. Why would we kill off this character when she can be Bosch's nemesis? We have an actress who's automatic, Mimi Rogers, comes prepared. There's not a lot of takes. She does her work, and she does it really well. And that is so important in TV because it's about speed. You can't be bogged down taking 10 takes because someone can't get it right. So you mentioned like Lance Reddick and Mimi Rogers, Titus, all the people that have sustaining roles on the show. It's what the audience sees. That's very important. But we also have a tendency to bring people back who we know is going to not slow the momentum of the process of making the show, that they're going to come prepared, they're going to do their work, it's going to be really good, and we move on to the next scene.
Well, as you know, we've been together your whole career and almost all of mine as a bookseller, and I've read you in real time. And yet I find as a reader, I'm perfectly okay with watching the TV develop, and characters that are not in the books. And it really enriches the reading, I think. Have you had any feedback from fans about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think people who read and watch can see it's not all one direction movement. It's not like all the stuff is going into the show. Stuff from the show comes back into the books. Definitely, for sure. Some of the more recent Harry Bosch books wouldn't even happen, where he's working for San Fernando as a volunteer cold case detective. That happened because we were making a show, and a cop from San Fernando, we were shooting in San Fernando, and a cop came and suggested that idea to me, and then took me and showed me around their little police department, and 3 books got born from that. So there is a definite back and forth. In the show, you got to spread the storytelling out. Harry Bosch can't be in every scene. So you create characters like Crate and Barrel, and you follow, like this past season, Jamie Hector, who plays Jerry Edgar, had a really big arc, and you follow that stuff, and it's really wonderful to come up with that in the writing room and work with other writers about it. And then that kind of somehow comes back into my writing. The more recent books have not been one narrator. They've not been all through Bosch. Bosch is splitting page counts with Renee Ballard or Mickey Haller, and that's really been fun to do. And so I think my books have taken a distinctive change in the structure, and that came from the TV show.
Well, obviously you're the writer on this, but tell me, because I've been interested. There are so many executive producers. What is an executive producer? And are you like a super executive producer?
It's like so arcane, but if you're not in the industry, it doesn't really matter. But in television, executive producer is the highest level credit you can get. And the closer you are to the end, the more important you are. So like the last executive producer, you can always know that's the showrunner. That's the creative boss of the show. I think I'm third to the end or second to the end because I created the books. And Eric, who is the showrunner, who has the last credit, he and I usually work out what we're going to try to do each season, working together. And that's been a really good relationship. But, everything in Hollywood, there's so many unions. So a lot of executive producers are writers who have gone up the ladder, who have been with the show 5 or 6 years. Almost each season, they get a bump up in credit, and eventually they hit executive producer. So the longer any show, including Bosch, stays on the air, the executive producer credits start piling up. And then I have to say, this is typical of Hollywood. There's people who finance the show in the beginning. So there's two executive producers on there I've never even met, but they were key people because they gave the money that financed the show in the first season. Because we were partners with Amazon, we had to, Amazon wasn't sure if it would be successful or not. So we paid for not half the show, but we paid for a big portion of the show, a company that we put together, and we had, other companies finance it. And then Amazon said, oh, this is a good show. So we went the whole thing and they bought everybody out, but they still get a credit. That was way more Hollywood information than I'm sure you ever wanted to know.
No, actually, I did want to know. And now I realize that in part, some of those credits that roll by are just like vanity license plates for some of these people.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, though, in movies, executive producer is almost a vanity credit. That's not the top credit in a film. In a film, the producer is the best credit to get. So it's
So
opposite of TV.
okay. My last question, you've had several of your books made into movies, starting, I think, was it Bloodwork with the Clint Eastwood movie? Was that the first one?
Yeah.
So how different has it been for you to be so involved in Bosch as compared to not being so involved in the movies, although you've always been a presence?
Well, I mean, it's been great. I mean, you start with the idea that a film is a director's medium, TV is a writer's medium. So the writers are boss on TV. In movies, they usually get like slapped behind the head, and sometimes they're not even allowed on the set. It's just a different, and that's why I've gravitated towards TV, because I want to be involved, especially Bosch. When Amazon came calling 7 years ago, at that point, I'd invested 20 years probably, if not more, in Harry Bosch, and there's no way I was just going to turn this character over and say, good luck, I hope you make something good. I just wasn't going to do it. I was like, if you want Bosch, I go with them, and it's not a vanity thing. I'm going to be involved in writing, creating, deciding. And they said, sure. They were probably naive because they were new in the business, because it's a hard deal to get. In the 2 movies that have been made on my work, I had almost nothing to do with them other than choosing who I sold. The power I had was choosing who to sell it to. Once I sold it, I was out of the picture and didn't have much to say, if anything.
So Poison Pen Press is the publisher of Carrie Greenwood's Miss Fisher Mysteries, which were a huge success in Australia on television. And they went on to make a film out of it, which came out this year, one movie, and very well might make another. So, it might be possible maybe when Bosch the TV is over to make a full-length movie. That was an extra question. I lied. I did ask an extra question.
Anything's possible in Hollywood, and Amazon makes movies, and it's very complicated. But the more the show stayed on, the more seasons that Bosch that were made, the longer the tail is on the contract. In other words, Amazon, I can't, like, the minute season 7 is done, I can't go off and sell Harry Bosch to the movies. Amazon has a hold on it that I think it's 4 or 5 years based on the success of the show. And so they'll have the controlling rights of Harry Bosch, and they might say, you know what, I wish we didn't end the show. Why don't we do a 2-hour movie? Let's see where Harry Bosch is now. So you never know what's going to happen. And I guess I just gave away that Bosch doesn't die at the end of season 7.
I don't think any of us really thought he would. Well, all I can say is if you do make a movie, I'd like to think that Coltrane will have a starring role, because he's really a special dog. I'm going to turn this over.
Well, let me just say that's, you were talking about the influences of the book. Dog is not in the books, and that was in fact Titus Welliver, who plays Bosch's idea. He just, we shot a season last year where he encounters a stray dog because he's undercover as a stray human, basically, and he just kind of on the spot said, I want to. And then Amazon compiles the most data in the world probably, and we got all this feedback. People love the dog. The dog has to come back in season 6. Don't forget about the dog. So now Bosch has a dog, but he doesn't have a dog in the books.
That's okay. As I said, we're all complicit in this expanding the Bosch universe into film. Patrick of our staff is now going to come and talk to Mike, but as he's moving towards me, Patrick, I want to put out a little shout out for a book I just finished, coming out June 3rd by David Pepper, called The Voter File. And the reason, Mike, that I'm giving The Voter File by Pepper a push is that it seems as though it's a book about manipulating election, and it's not. But what it really is about is the collapse of the newspaper industry and corporate newspaper publishing. Wow. And I think that you would find it absolutely fascinating. I certainly did. And I know that's something Patrick wants to talk to you about. So farewell.
Thank you.
Hey, Mike. How are you?
Hey.
Always great to see you. It's funny. I was thinking about, it's really great to see Jack McEvoy, come back. And I was thinking about when I first met you, and it was, I believe, right after your book, The Last Coyote, had just come out, and the poet, I think, was next. So it's been a few years.
Yeah.
Now with Jack
Many.
McEvoy, what's that?
Too many to talk about. I think.
I know, man. I know. You had you had a red beard and long red hair at the time, and where have the years gone?
Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah. But no, that I wanted to ask you about this book, and it's why did you decide that this particular time, this moment was right to bring McEvoy back? Was it, as Barbara was alluding to, it's we live in strange times, and you're seeing, and politics doesn't really matter, no matter what side of the coin you're on, you're seeing opinion or agenda-driven journalism kind of in some ways taking over, and this investigative journalists discredited, and can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, this book had two starting points. One was about technology, which we can talk about later, and the other was, as you say, the times we find ourselves in regarding the media, and basically it's the growing chasm between people who trust the media and those who don't. There's very much a lack of trust. I was reminded of this just recently in the pandemic, when some people started going to beaches that were closed, and I saw a photo of a lady in the water holding a sign that said, "The media is the virus." And I thought, well, I mean, that's why I wrote this book. Is the media the virus, or is the media being manipulated? And, I don't make political statements in my books. I don't want to be didactic. I don't want to tell people how to think, what politics, who to vote for. I don't want to do any of that. But I think there's a place in the world for unbiased and undaunted journalism, and that's the world I came from before I started writing novels, and so it's near and dear to me. And so what can I do? I write thrillers, so that's what I did. I wrote thrillers about an unbiased, undaunted reporter, and if there's a political statement in that, it's just that here's a guy doing the job the right way, and that's what we need, because if that goes away, we're not going to have, where are all the watchdogs going to be? Who's going to watch over everybody? And so I think it's an important thing, and it could be slipping away. So here's a story about a guy who does it the right way and won't let it slip away.
There was we had a gentleman here who's the editor of the Encyclopedia Britannica, right? Yeah, and he was here about a year ago, I suppose, and he was talking about the general kind of frustration, I think, among readers of all different kinds for vetted, accurate facts, and reporting. It kind of reflects what you're talking about. That where do you go to get objective reporting and news that doesn't have some sort of agenda or slant to it, from either side, as I said.
Yeah, it's hard to find, as cable news seems to be drifting apart to one side or the other.
Right.
A lot of newspapers, and also a lot of people just don't seem to understand that newspapers have divisions, and one side is political, it's opinion, but one side is just the facts man reporting. And some people believe that the opinion is infiltrating into the fact-based reporting, and in some places it does, and then in others it's rather bizarre how it's treated and distrusted.
Now it's pretty well known to readers that you started off your career as an investigative reporter for various different places, right? And then ending with the LA Times.
Yeah, I never called myself an investigative reporter. I was kind of like I was a crime reporter, with very limited times that I did investigative stuff. I mean, I recovered crimes, and sometimes that took some dogged research and pushing and so forth. But for the most part, I was kind of like crime of the day type reporter, and sometimes I went behind the headlines to say more.
Now, Jack McEvoy, correct me about the chronology here if I'm wrong, but in this book, it's about maybe a decade since his last book. Yeah, The Scarecrow, and he's kind of not doing terribly well financially. He's having to adjust to sort of dwindling fortunes. Can you give us kind of an update on where he is as this book opens and kind of what gets him started?
Well, I mean, it's been 11 years, and the 11 years haven't all been that kind to him. And his life is reflecting the industry of the newspaper business. It's pretty much collapsed. Good jobs are few and far between. And a lot of it is kind of like filtered out into the internet. And so there's a lot of nonprofit journalism out there, where you don't get big paychecks, but you can do some good work, and that's where he finds himself. I always break that wall where, the two previous books, The Poet and The Scarecrow, I always mention those cases that Jack wrote best-selling books about those cases in this fictional world. And so it's been 11 years since he's written a book, 11 years since he's had a bestseller and had a lot of money. So he's living in a one-bedroom apartment and, looking for redemption and salvation, and he finds it in a case. I happen to have the book right here, and there's this one line where he kind of talks about his situation in the world, and he gets into his Jeep, which he bought, 11 years before with a royalty check, and the royalty checks have pretty much diminished, and he uses the odometer to kind of mark how far he is from where he was. And just to read this one line here, it said, "I bought the Wrangler new with the advance of my last book, and the odometer served as a reminder of how long it had been since I was buying new cars and writing bestseller lists. I checked it as I fired up the engine. I had strayed exactly 162,172 miles from the path I had once been on." I think that pretty much says it all about where Jack is. He's way off course from where he thought he would be.
Now, I have to ask you this. We had with the first book was The Poet, second book, The Scarecrow. Did your editor not let you do The Shrike? Or was that an early title?
Oh yeah, yeah. I did. I think I turned it in called The Shrike.
Yeah.
And there's.
This isn't a
Did I tell you
spoiler,
about that, or do you just think that?
I just was guessing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because it fit in the line of The Poet, The Scarecrow, and The Shrike, but they were concerned that The Shrike was too obscure.
Esoteric. Yeah.
And I think there's also a comic book character called The Shrike, so there's a lot of complications to that, and that's why it didn't survive. It's not the first time I've turned in a book with one title and another thing came out.
So there's so much to talk about with this book. He has, as the book kind of opens, Jack McEvoy is sort of approached by the cops following the murder of this woman with whom he's had I guess you'd say a one-night stand, really. Can you, I don't know, set up the book a little bit, and then we can get into all the good DNA stuff we can talk about.
Well, yeah, so Jack's 170,000 miles off course, and he's doing good work. He's working for a nonprofit news site but specializes in consumer reporting and consumer protection, which is a very worthy thing, but not what he's known for, probably not in his heart what he would like to do. And so he comes home from work checks the odometer, is reminded of where he is and where he should be. And the police are waiting to talk to him about this woman who he was with for one night. He met on a kind of a dating service type thing a year before, but she's been murdered, and they were easily able to connect to him, to find him, to ask him about her, and basically they want his DNA in order to clear him. And so he provides the DNA, and he knows, and the reader knows there's no surprise here. He didn't do it, but he's Jack McEvoy, and if you've read the prior books, he's not going to wait around and call every 3 days and say, did my DNA clear me? He's going to go out and clear himself. He's going to look into this case. He's a reporter. That's what he does. He sticks his nose into things. And so that's the start of it. And he starts looking into this woman's murder. And through the kind of work journalists do, a lot of it's internet, a lot of it is, kind of in the shadows or close to the line. Like, I think he doesn't lie, but he carefully writes emails and so forth that don't contain lies, but don't really tell the whole truth. And he starts pulling together information, and it looks like this murder could be linked to others. And so now suddenly Jack is ahead of the police. And as a guy who was a journalist, I was almost never ahead of the police. And so this is the fantasy element I put into the Jack McEvoy books, where he's pushing the action and he's ahead of the police. And that's one reason why I love writing these books when I get around to writing about Jack.
Now, I'm terrible about giving away spoilers, but there are a couple of things, and they're all early on in the book, but there are a few things that I just wanted to ask you about. One of them is the manner in which this woman is killed. It's a very specific, very gruesome method, and very specific, as I said. And as he's looking into that, the AOD, I think it's called, and I forget what exactly that stands for at this moment, but is it okay to bring that up since I've already done it?
Yeah. It's a lanto-occipital dislocation. It's basically, they call it internal decapitation, like your head stays on your body, but it's been twisted so badly that inside all your bones and spinal cord are all separated. And it usually happens in a car accident. And it's just one of those things that in my life I come across stuff and I just put it in my pocket thinking I'll use that someday. So I did, it's weird. I've been asked this. I've done a few interviews already, and people keep saying, how'd you come up with that? And I can't even remember. It's a real thing. You can look it up online and all that kind of stuff. And I don't even remember how I came across it. I just knew it's what normally happens in car accidents or a long fall from something. But I thought maybe that would be a clever way for someone to kill people and make it look like an accident. And that's what's going on here. And that's not really a spoiler. That's something Jack comes across pretty quickly.
And he also comes across, you mentioned a little bit about DNA and this era we find ourselves in, after the human genome was sequenced, and all these sort of small, trace your DNA, trace your genetics companies are coming up, and people are, a lot of people are taking advantage of those, and they're curious to learn these secrets about them, their health or their background. But there's, you really get into it in this book deeply, about privacy concerns. There are a lot of things that people don't realize when they're signing up for these kind of services. And again, this is very early on in the book. Is it okay to talk a little bit about that and how kind of going down the black hole of researching that sort of thing?
Well, that was the other starting point for the book. I mentioned there was two. The other one was I read a story online where the Pentagon had put out a directive to all military personnel not to submit their DNA to any of these analytic firms, to find their heritage or any kind of medical background. They said, do not do it because we have concerns about the security of the DNA. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. Why would they be worried about that? And so I did a little research, and it didn't really take much time to learn that there's almost no government oversight in that billion-dollar industry. It's something that's kind of like under advisement. It was, started with, I might have this backwards, but one federal agency had, I think it was the Federal Trade Commission, and then they realized this is a huge industry and it's only going to get bigger. So they kicked it over to the FDA, and the FDA has a 5-year study plan before they will come out with rules and regulations. And that's great. But in the meantime, millions of people are giving their DNA. And so, maybe it's completely secure. I use a fictional company, so I'm not here to slight any of these analytic firms, but I was just really taken by the idea that the Pentagon says, do not do this. And, and part of my research was that, technology in the world, changes super quickly. And again, I don't remember the source. It was either a book I read or just some of the discussion online where people say, what in 20 years, the DNA might be something that you use to identify yourself, instead of a driver's license, or instead of a fingerprint, you lick your finger and you touch something, and then that tells them confirms who you are. But what happens if you already gave your DNA away 20 years before? So there's those kind of concerns that I think are, intellectual things to talk about. And I've sparingly written about Jack McEvoy over the years, about every 10 years, it seems. But what I usually do with him is have him go down some road that has something to do with technology. And so like the last time, the Scarecrow, he was out in your neck of the woods, Phoenix, Scottsdale, and it was all about digital storage, in the cloud and things like that. And, I just always start with the idea that for every great technological advance, the human genome, now we know all this stuff about ourselves. There's people out there, you can guarantee it, there's people out there trying to figure out, how do I turn it against them? How do I turn it against humanity? How do I make something off of this? So there's always villains out there, and it's not just fiction, it's real life. And that's where I always bring Jack in. I like the idea of using him as a reporter to kind of report on, and maybe, hold up a little bit of a fair warning flag to say, be careful about this, or this is where we're at. And I think a lot of people will read this book and think it's science fiction, and none of it's science fiction. It's all based on, the standards and the science as we know it today.
That's interesting, reading or listening to interviews with somebody like Edward Snowden, who revealed, some, you can disagree or agree with him, but, revealed the extent of the sophistication of the technology now, and, the extent in which it's very easy for anybody to surveil us, usually to sell you something. But yeah, it gets pretty scary. Yeah, there probably are questions. But one last thing I wanted to get into before we check for questions. The kind of the different roles as you see it between a reporter and a detective. You have Harry Bosch's kind of his very famous kind of motto, everybody counts or nobody counts. And you think about a detective. There's that famous bit about the detective doesn't work the case so much as the case works the detective. And with the reporter, it's the story. The story drives the reporter. Do you see a lot of overlap in the two basic roles?
I think, yeah, I do, in terms of the personality behind it. This idea of being unrelenting, being relentless, undaunted. They share those aspects. I think the challenge is greater for the reporter, and maybe that's because maybe that shows why I only write about Jack every 10 years, because I'm lazy or something. It's easy to write about Harry Bosch because he represents the state. He's got a badge. He's got a gun, and all rights entitle him to stick his nose in the stuff. It's not so much apparent or accepted with reporters. There's a lot of people out there, as we already talked about this, a growing population. People don't like what reporters do. It's similar with Mickey Hall, the Lincoln Lawyer. A lot of people don't like defense lawyers. And so those books are a greater challenge, because the number one challenge in writing any kind of book is connecting your reader with your protagonist. And with Bosch, maybe that explains why I've written more Bosch books than any other character, because that's easy. Who doesn't want Harry Bosch to find the bad guy who murdered this person, this victim? And so you start on page one with that connection pretty much secured. And then with Mickey Haller and with the reporter, you got to work at it a lot more. And you know, that's the challenge that I give myself when I write these characters. But at the end of the day, I strayed way off your question. But at the end of the day, you're right. They are people. They're all people that are looking for a hidden truth, and they have different roles and different advantages or disadvantages in finding that truth. But that's what it's about. And you got to have someone, and I'll include Ballard in this, that is just unrelentless and fierce in going after that. And they're willing to risk themselves and those close to them to find that truth.
And there can be, you know, sort of a symbiotic relationship in the books between a reporter and a cop, but also an antagonistic one in the books.
Oh yeah, I mean that just comes from my own experience. I mean, it was not easy to be a reporter who covered the LAPD, because the LAPD blamed the LA Times for all their woes, all their scandals and all that. You know, would have been swept under the carpet if there hadn't been a vigilant press watching over the department. And so, you know, that was a hard place to be. But eventually, by telling the truth, being accurate, you win people over, and you start developing sources, and then they start paying off. And that was one of the wonderful parts about being a reporter, when stuff starts paying off for your hard work. Sometimes years of hard work starts paying off. It's a wonderful thing. And you know, there's I don't know, it was a great job. I keep going way off of your questions. I don't even remember what the question was. I'm just babbling here. But yeah, I mean, you talked about the antagonism. Yeah, there's that, and you find that between cops and defense lawyers and so forth. That's just the way it is, and I try to capture that in the books. Sometimes I capture it from experience.
I'm just looking at my phone here. I'm just looking to see if we have some questions, and we do. Let's see here. I have a number of questions were basically the same thing, which you're touching on, which is how much of Jack is kind of directly informed by your own experience. Is there a point where Jack ends and you begin, or is there?
Well, I mean, I haven't been a reporter in 25 years, and it was a different world then. You know, so the basic instincts of Jack are the same no matter where we are in the industry. But back when I was a reporter, it was the newspapers were fat and happy. You know, I get sent on a story and they'd fly me first class. I mean, those years are long gone, because all the advertising, not all of it, but, you know, most of the advertising went to the internet, you know, went to Craigslist and things like that. That killed the newspapers and you know, really impacted what they can do, their resources. I remember the LA Times was so big and heavy, the Sunday newspaper weighed like 10 pounds. They got sued once because a delivery man threw the paper and it killed a little dog. And the owner of the dog sued the newspaper. And, you know, and that's like an apocryphal story. Now the newspaper, if you flew through it, it would probably float all over the place. It's so thin. And that's pretty much what has happened in 25 years. And so I'm writing about Jack McEvoy in, you know, 2020. And it's just not an experience I've had. But I should have mentioned this. Fair Warning is a real news site where he works. It's a real thing. You can go check it out, fairwarning.org. And it's run by a guy I worked with at the LA Times. And so the real guy, he plays a big role in the book. Myron Levin is a real person I've known for 30 some years, a really great journalist. And
there's a great detail about something about he wrote a story that made somebody do something. I can't really get it. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, that's a true story. I mean, when you were a journalist, you always loved outing the scoundrels, if I ever did any investigative reporting, like you said, it was every now and then I'd like write a story about some guy who was doing plastic surgery or something that wasn't even a doctor. And then the scoundrel would always sue you to save face and sue you for $10 million. But, you don't publish a story until you have it nailed down. So you wouldn't even be worried. I get, slapped with a writ or whatever you call it, that I'm being sued for $10 million, and it'd be, let's go celebrate at the hangout after work. And, but Myron, who's the character in the book and in real life, he topped everybody because he sued some guy who was scamming, I think roofs repair or something like that. And so he sued Myron, and among his causes of action was that his false story had created such emotional turmoil that he started bleeding from the seat. That was actually in the lawsuit. It's not a legal term, but when that got around the newsroom that he had written a story that had made some guy bleed from the seat, you could get sued for $100 million, and it wasn't as good as that story. That was the tops. And so I had to include that in this novel. But it's a true story.
We've had a couple of people. Most people are just saying, hey, Michael, we love your books, and have a great audience here. But there have been a few people that have mentioned Renee Ballard, and I wanted to bring her up too. What a fantastic character she is. Are you writing about her now, or what's next for you?
Next is a book, Mickey Haller, a Lincoln lawyer book, and it has Bosch in it in a limited way, but no Renee. And I liked, last year with the Night Fire and the book before, I kind of established a working relationship between Renee Ballard and Harry Bosch that I really like. And so I am pretty sure I'll go back to that next year.
Can you give us
what it'll be or anything like that.
Right. Can you give us kind of just a taste of what the Haller book is about, or do you have a title for it yet?
Yeah, it's called The Law of Innocence, and basically starts out with Mickey Haller in jail for he's charged with a murder, and he believes he's been set up, and he's going to defend himself. That saying that a lawyer who defends himself has a fool for a client. That might be true, but Mickey's not going to put his future and his life in anybody else's hands. So it's about him and his team, including Bosch, trying to figure out who set this up, and as he prepares to go to trial.
There's a question here about the short stories that you write. Occasionally it says, will there ever be a collected volume of your short stories? I don't think there has been, has there?
No, not yet. Eventually there will be. I've always thought that's the year that I get writer's block and I can't put out a book. I'll put out all the short stories. So if you ever do see the collection come out, you should go, uh-oh, there might be something wrong.
Let's see. Here's a question. Any ideas for books set with all new characters or different professions?
Different professions. I don't know about that. I don't plan my future too much. I just said I think next year I'm going to write about Bosch and Ballard. I don't even have the story. I don't know anything about it. It's just an inkling I have that I'll do that. So when you work that way, something can take hold. An idea can take hold. So I'll never say never. But right now I don't have anything, definitely planned on the radar.
There's somebody brings up a good point, which is any thought on Ballard and Bosch's daughter teaming up at some point in the future?
Yeah, that could happen. I write in real time, so I've been kind of waiting for his daughter, Maddie, to get a little bit older. And, because I want it to be realistic. I want, when I decided to write about Ballard, I toyed with the idea of making that Maddie, and I ultimately said no, because she could not have lived enough life. It's one thing to have a plot and an investigation or whatever you're doing, but you have, at the same time as this book moves forward with the plot, you got to go backwards and fill in the storyline. And I just felt that she had not lived enough life and had enough experiences to sustain a connection with the readers. So I'm seasoning her, I guess you could say. I'm giving her some time to build up some of that.
Right. Now, I asked you this the other day. You mentioned that you'd been sheltering in place for 25 years. This whole coronavirus thing maybe wasn't as difficult for writers. And we're hearing that a lot, aren't we, Barbara?
We are, but it was interesting that I asked that question yesterday of Martin Walker, whose new Bruno Chief of Police book, The Shooting at Chateau Rock, came out, talking to him in France, which I have to say is there are very few pluses to where we are with this virus, but the opportunity to talk to people we wouldn't normally see, like Val McDermott, let's say, or I did a very nice chat with Ian Rankin, is a plus. But he said that the distraction level is such that maybe it isn't as easy to be writing at this time. I don't know. I think it depends on the personality.
I was paralyzed for about a month. I didn't write for a month. I didn't write for all of March. And that's probably the longest I've gone without writing a page in my life, my adult life since college. And I write very contemporary stuff. And so this book I just kind of talked about, The Law of Innocence, it all was leading up to a trial in April of this year. It starts in February and goes through April. Well, the courts are closed in LA. They closed them in mid-March. So I was paralyzed. What do I do? Do I throw this out and wait till the virus is over, or do we till we have a clear picture of what society is going to be like and then start over? And I wasn't sure what to do. And eventually, after about a month of knowing, I'm a writer, I got to write, I backed a story up so that it takes place December, January, February. So I will have the beginning of the virus, be reflecting on kind of our naivete when the virus was out there and there was reporting on it, going all the way back to January, but it wasn't taken seriously, or people didn't know how serious it was. I myself, I went to this annual gathering of baseball friends. About 40 of us actually went to a baseball game on March 6th together. So I was part of this group, part of the world that didn't understand what was coming. And that is past us, and I can reflect on that in the book. So I moved the book back and rewrote it, went through it again, not a complete rewrite, but I started putting in Haller noticing reports on this strange virus that people are concerned is going to sweep the world. And so when the book comes out in November, it will be hopefully an accurate accounting of the early days of the virus. And it's not a big part of it. It's completely in background, but it's there. And so I'm able to do what I've done with my other books, and that's reflect on society in the year that the book is published.
Shall I do a few more questions here and then wrap it up? Okay. Let's see here. Let's see. Do you have a favorite writer? That's kind of the standard question, or maybe a couple of favorite writers that kind of you go back to again and again?
You mean that are still publishing, or just dead writers? Or?
Dead writers are fine.
No, there's a few of them. I mean, I won't go dead. I mean, all the classics are, everyone knows them. I think people that I continue to always learn from James Lee Burke. The guy's an amazing stylist, and he just keeps putting them out. Really good books. So, in terms of writing, that's he's a high water mark. And then I get this question, and all the names go blowing out of my head. But Don Winslow's books in the last 10 years have been pretty amazing. The stuff he's done. Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, I got to say it's rare. Like, I didn't read Don's last book yet. It's rare that I don't have a lot of time to read because I can write when most people read. So I'd rather be writing than reading. And so it's very sparing. And so I try not to just read the same writers over and over. I'm looking for new people. I'd say the last book that really impressed me was Ivy Pakoda's book. It just came out, I think, last week.
Terrific.
About LA. I write about LA, and then I get blown away by somebody writing about a part of LA with authority that, I can't even touch, that I haven't been there, I don't know it. And then I read this book, and it's great.
Yeah, I got to interview her last week. Really, really sharp, original voice.
Yeah.
Especially with this book, don't you think?
Yeah, I also liked, I always forget the names of books, something Valley, Happy Valley, or whatever she wrote.
Wonder Valley.
Wonder Valley, that was a good one too. And she's somebody, who was writing about New York, then moved out here and really captured the place. Pretty amazing talent to be able to do that.
Absolutely. I guess for a final question, this is how was Titus Welliver cast originally for the role of Harry Bosch? I'm sure you've been asked this a lot, but I'm not sure if
It was weird because on the very first, we had I forget, it was either 6 or 8 weeks to cast Bosch, and we all knew it was the most important thing. The series was going to live or die with that character who we got. And I had seen Titus in a supporting role on a TV show where he played a guy with PTSD. And I really liked how he was able to carry that internal baggage without talking about it. In fact, like, he wouldn't talk about it, but you could tell he had it. And, we had to transition. When you read the books, you're in Harry's head, you know his memories, you know his feelings. All that goes out the window on a TV show. And so we had to find somebody who could project the internal damage and the baggage. And so on the very first day, we were with 2 casting directors, and they had put together 5 or 6 pages of actors' names, and we were just an opening discussion to talk about who we saw. And Titus's name wasn't on it, and I'm like a book writer. I'm not a TV guy, so I was very intimidated. But I said, "What about Titus Welliver?" And then I kind of went like this because I thought I might get yelled at. And he's terrible or he's a jerk. No one will work with him, that kind of thing. But instead they said, we love him, but he's making a film in Hong Kong all summer, so he won't be here during our 6 weeks. So we kind of dropped him, and then we started talking to actors and auditioning actors. And then there's a whole level of actors that won't audition. You just have to give them an offer, and that you're really like wringing your hands, saying, I wonder if this is going to be the right guy. So some of them would do a phone call with you, but they wouldn't audition. And it was going on, and we just weren't comfortable. And we weren't finding Harry Bosch. And then one of the casting directors said, Titus is coming back for a long weekend to visit his kids from Hong Kong. And he's agreed to come in on a Saturday. And so he came in, he was totally jet lagged, and he auditioned. He read a part that was in the first episode. And he was really great. And he left. And before he got out of the parking lot, we gave him the job. So
I was going to step in here.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Michael, I just wanted to felicitate you. This is publication day, after all, for your book. and to say how much it's meant to all of us we've debuted many of your novels.
Yeah.
So it means a lot to us to sort of have the first conversation with you. I really thank you.